I would now like to open the first panel with my panelists talking about what is behind of us, what we have already achieved so far, and what's up for us. Marina is the director and co-founder of the European Crypto Initiative, a European advocacy group focused on crypto regulation. And therefore, I think this is very important that we have you with us, because we need to talk about regulation and understand more about this. Since 2017, Marina has been working with crypto projects on governance and legal matters with a focus on decentralization. So Marina is an expert on key crypto regulatory topics and follows the recent regulatory development and their influence on the industry. Thank you so much for being with us today. Next, we have Dr. Amel Makhlouf, and I'm very happy having you here, because also Amel is focusing on something we probably have not taken that much into consideration, and therefore please allow me to introduce Amel. Dr. Amel Makhlouf is an independent counsel and arbitrator, and she's specialized in international arbitration, banking and finance, Islamic law and finance, and law of the Middle East. So, and I think this is of utmost interest to figure out how the crypto world belongs to Islamic law and how this goes hand in hand. So I think we can learn a lot from you. Last but not least, I dare to say so, Markus Kluge. Markus is the CPO of TokenForge, a Berlin-based company. I'm very happy having you here with us. And you have a long experience in e-commerce and legal tech. Before co-founding TokenForge, he served as CEO of Protected Shops and, what is this, Janolaw? Janolaw, okay, specializing in regulatory technologies and compliance automation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please a warm welcome for my panel. And allow me to start. I would like, I made my notes, and now I'm confusing myself. This is very nice. I would like to start with the question to all of you. Blockchain has often been described as a solution in search of problems. Yeah, where is the nail? We already have the hammer. So, looking back over the decade, what relevant financial problems has blockchain technology actually solved? Is there anything we can say blockchain could solve something, or is this just a dream we are chasing? I'd like to hand it over to you, Marina.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction and the invite. So I'll start, and I'm sure my colleagues have so many more to add, but it seems that since the beginning of when we first heard about blockchain, finance has been really the first and the most used use case in a way. It's been the creation of crypto assets. Now also from a legal point of view, we have a definition of what a crypto asset is and all the service providers around that. So in a way, it's creating a completely new economy that we have not had before. So that is more in a way on a crypto side. But with blockchain, we had a brilliant presentation and talk previously stating all the use cases and everything that also the European Union has done in this regard when it comes to supply chain, when it comes to other useful interactions. And in a way, I'm thinking that this development, specifically when I'm talking to maybe the younger generation, they're like, this is the industry where we would want to work in, because we feel some sense of like empowerment that we can create the things that we want. And another very important thing that in a way blockchain brought is mostly open sourceness of the technology. So in a way, the useful thing is not only the asset or the blockchain itself, but the way how the blockchains are created and the way how the applications are created. We usually say in modular terms, or different smart contracts coming together, building blocks, building one application, using other modulars, combining in a different way, building a new application. And so those two elements, the modularity and the fact that smart contracts mostly and the code is open source, means that you can build much faster than we usually would build in a closed source environment. So I think that this is a pretty good way of how to innovate faster.
Thank you. But I would like to come back, Moritz. Sorry for this. Markus. Moritz is your co-partner. So that's the reason. The two M's are confusing me. I'm so sorry for this. Coming back, what real thing we have on hand beside Bitcoin? Is there anything we can say, yes, this really has an impact?
Well, this really has an impact. Is maybe a little bit too early, but we have a lot of examples in place where we really adopted classical financial instruments like bonds and funds and even now shares of an AG in a regulated way on a public permissionless blockchain. So there are already use cases, not only POCs, but really in place, which struggle a little bit to be adopted by a high number of investors because they are not highly integrated yet. But from the technical and from the regulatory point of view, we are pretty far. We can do everything. We already tested it. We already did it. But we do not have the adoption of the industry, of the investors. There's still some, there's no integration yet. So, okay. And the trust is not there yet. And this is something that we have to build in the next years. And we have to integrate more into classical systems. We cannot act like DeFi, where we just create a completely new ecosystem out of nothing. Yeah, we have to integrate, and this is what is the challenge for the next years. But there is already a lot of things in place that can be used as blueprints for other cases and can be developed further to integrate into the ecosystem and the economy.
So the ChatGPT moment is still missing.
Well, actually, the iPhone moment is still missing. It's not. It's the integration and the placement. Okay. And talking about ChatGPT, it is that AI agent and AI might be an accelerator of the whole process because they rely on, or they need to rely on settlement security, on atomic and instant settlement. And this is something that might really accelerate the whole process of adoption because this is something where, again, not from the traditional industry, but from the outside, demand will be generated for reliable data and reliable transaction data that also will be needed in real-world applications and real-world assets.
Thank you. Joachim, I would like to ask you a bit about the future, and you already mentioned several things during your talk, but CBDCs, do you have any idea what's going on with the CBDCs? How will this market, how will the EU, for instance, will be affected by issuing the CBDCs? Tell us a bit more about your insights, please.
It's fascinating, Katarina, that you ask me about the future and then come to one of the most boring examples that we have in the future. Because, I mean, we see, luckily, with CBDCs, especially in Europe, with the digital euro now, an acceleration. Yesterday, there was an event here in Berlin at the representation of Hesse, where the Bundesbank was. And as you know, the Bundesbank has been engaged in the wholesale CBDC trials, of which we have 3. There are certain parts of the Bundesbank that still, like the ECB, insist on the relevance of the retail digital euro, but I think we all know that the key applications will be on programmable money when it comes to CBDCs for industry. There is no competition, in my opinion, between either CBDCs or stablecoins or whatever, because the world is big enough for all of that. If you look at the preference structures from the demand side, you talk to different companies, you know very well that there are companies that say they would never touch a stablecoin. There are companies that say they would never touch a digital euro. Luckily, preferences are different and we can all learn from each other. So I think we expect in the autumn, where the next decision has to be taken after the 2-year period that then ends, which we have now, what the way forward is. But a lot more people than a year ago expect pretty soon some sort of, let's say, perhaps wholesale digital euro solution starting next year, perhaps the year thereafter. Many people tell me that this is a sort of transgression thing, so probably not really a huge final solution, but something to work with in practice, which I think is the natural way forward anyway, because you do not start, Markus is absolutely right, with the big thing, but you go in small steps. Now, allow me, when you talk about the future, to be slightly more radical.
Please.
And I would like to use an example that is completely politically incorrect, but we are in Berlin, so to be in the spirit of my co-Prussian Clausewitz, I would like to take a little example of military history, because I wonder actually when I look at the future and we hear about space, how can we actually envisage what we're doing? And with all due respect, the best example that I can get in my imagination is actually the tanks of Guderian in the Second World War. Because when Germany invaded France, apologies for that, he used tanks in a way that was not only completely new, but also completely discredited by his own army, because he just sent the tanks going. And the tradition by that time was that you send the tanks, you occupy the next village, then comes the infantry walking, they secure it, and then the tanks go further. And what Guderian did, to the horror of his superiors, is he just sent the tanks through to the Channel coast. And then there was so much chaos that somehow the land afterwards was filled later. Now, this is precisely what we're seeing here. And actually, I found the discussion on space a little bit falling too short, because this is not science fiction. I would personally expect within the next 10 years, probably in the next 5 years, that someone whose first name might be Elon just goes out there with spaceships and just occupies some territory out there, not with humans, but with technology, declares this a state, and then there says, okay, let's now do business. And there's already a big discussion in legal quarters at universities on how these contracts look like for space trading and things like that for blockchain. So everything in the previous presentation was right, but the concerns, of course, of how you behave in the global context where you have all these rules that have been mentioned will not that much apply, of course, if a really radical innovator, and I'm not making a normative statement here, just go out there and takes this to the extreme, and this will happen. Blockchain, crypto is a space of extremes. It's a space where the frontier is shifting extremely far, but most people actually have great difficulty in taking the little steps moving forward and trying this out and filling this with life. And this is an increasing divergence that we will have to live with, because I don't like the question about is it really a solution looking for problems, because the problems are not new either. The problems are there anyway. People want to have solutions for value transfer. People want to have a secure expectation environment. People want to be able to find rules for their communities. These are things that blockchain deals with, and blockchain doesn't have to apologize for that because it contributes to that discussion and it brings these things. But the perception of blockchain will always and increasingly be torn by the extremes. But then we have to work on all the rest of us making productive use out of that, which is a huge challenge. And if you direct this discourse in the wrong direction, you lose completely track of what is actually happening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughts. I really appreciate this, and I think I can agree on many things you've said, especially two things I would like to highlight and then give it back to the podium. Let's say the breakthrough that we see a mass adoption with that technology. Probably somehow a digital euro is the way to create that kind of trust, what you already mentioned. That trust is something which is currently not that much built, but because of the mass adoption, people will easily or easier understand what this is all about. And then probably we can build on that. And regarding to the space, as you said, let's go to the extreme. We already see companies working on that extreme. You and I know. And therefore it is, I think it could come out as a dystopian kind of world, but it also could be something good in. And it's up to all of us to create the good one out of this. I'd like to move on with, I have tons of questions for my panelists, and therefore I'd like to move on. Coming to the principle, faith and ethics, which is, I think, also a very big thing when we talk about blockchain solution, trust, you already mentioned this. How can we build, how can we create trust that people really trust, like they trust Deutsche Bank, to say so? I'd first like to hand it over to you.
Well, this is a little bit difficult because people tend to trust people. And people do not really trust systems. And what blockchain actually is doing is that it's putting regulation or automation or security into technology, into code. And this is something that we have to overcome somehow, and to build really to convince the people that that they can trust the technology more than they can trust the incumbents in their silos. And this is something where we are working on and we have now some more tools available since the beginning of the year. And it's not the CBDC, it's the stable coins. We can now build really business cases that really matter and that are feelable for the people, that the people can feel and can see. And so we can start building trust in a space that was actually available only for those who were playing on this green field outside in DeFi. They trust in technology, they see, there are a lot of examples where you can actually prove to everybody that, that those systems, those DAOs, those smart contracts, those rules are working, and that the blockchain itself actually never gets hacked. Some other systems do, but the blockchain is working. The system is working, and but still the people tend to trust persons. For some reasons, they trust certain politicians. It is still persons, and we need to convince them that that technology actually is more reliable than organizations. And having said that, we have to do that in lower the burden for what we try to do with all the regulatory frameworks that we have. If we really manage to bring these things, this regulation and the security into code and to prove it, then we really have some success for, or the killer case or success for the blockchain, because this is very important. Because trust is one thing, privacy is the next thing, which is one of the very big issue right now. And how to build business cases that can work with this transparency that is there in the blockchain, which is actually built by publicity. Yeah, transparency by publicity, which is not really a good thing to combine with money. Yeah, so, and other values. And when we solve this problem, and there are a lot of projects working on that, and I think we are on the edge of that. Zero knowledge is one of the buzzwords here, and other things, and other cryptographic things that we can put together and combine in a clever way to build this trust. But it's not yet there. So our use cases right now tend to stuck in a proof of concept or MVP state, because we cannot overcome those hurdles.
Those hurdles. Okay, Marina, he mentioned that not only trust needs to be built up, but also regulation needs to be lowered. Can you give us some ideas of how this can be done? What is your initiative about? Where is your kind of way to create awareness? We have to bring down the burdens of regulation.
Yeah, and in a way we had this opportunity also as, I would say, the people that work in this ecosystem, that work in Europe, to talk to regulators for years already. They were very early on in looking into mostly crypto assets, not that much blockchain yet, but maybe in the future, that there was like an open dialogue and really understanding of what and how crypto assets should be regulated. And I would maybe go back to, in a way, the basics of thinking about how the blockchain ecosystem is built in terms of like having the lower layer, the blockchain, the layer one, that is really the technical layer that we sometimes, in a way, think about a kind of an internet, and on top of which things are built. And I think that when it comes to trust, is that the specific, some of the oldest layer ones and blockchains have not, as it was mentioned, been hacked yet, and they are trusted by millions and millions of people that are using them in different ways, or they're using crypto assets that are in a way built on top of it, or applications, or different things. And we also do know that this industry, as it was mentioned, is an industry of extremes, and we do hear different news and different things reported as hacks, etc. And that does create like a feeling of unsafety, a feeling that things should not be trusted. But I would invite everyone to think about this layer, to map and see, okay, this thing that happened, the hack that happened, the thing that I'm afraid of and I don't trust it, where it is on this like layer stack. Is it an application? Who was it built for, by? In which way it was built? On which blockchain, happened in a way? But things that are the basics of what we're talking here about have not been hacked in 15 years, in 10 years, in longer. So I think that is where I would say that I would trust those layer ones, but when it comes to specific smart contracts and application, I would ask myself a lot of questions and really do the analysis there and then understand, should I trust those applications almost the same way as I would trust the blockchain as well?
Provocative question. You talked about trust, and I 100% agree with you. Go through and analyze. But think about the Joe Average, let me call him like this. He wants to have a solution, smart, convenient, and I don't want to dive that deep into this thing. How can I still trust if I hear all about the scams and the people who are going to rip me up? So tell me something about this, and probably also, I see, Margaret, you like to...
Yeah, so basically the way I'm really used to talk to builders a lot, and what I was describing before was really on the kind of a builder's side, like what applications to use. But when it comes to consumers, absolutely, regulation is the place that, makes this thing secure, because we're talking about the highest level of the stack, the one that is addressing users directly, and the ones that has website and is inviting users to use it, and those are the ones that also should be in a way regulated, looked up, and having disclosures, having licenses, etc.
Well, actually, we faced the same situation than we faced it like 25 to 30 years ago when the internet was built. The first applications were adult industry and scam shops. And it took a lot of time till some organizations like Amazon built the trust because they delivered. So actually it is the use case or the business case that is good enough to attract a lot of people that they use it and then start to trust it. In Germany, we had a special situation. We had some organization like Trusted Shops. They gave stamps and they did some checking of the shops. This might be something that might be needed or might accelerate the process. But actually, it is that people experience a working and valuable process. Yeah, that's it. And that's the way how we have to build trust, and that's why we need good business cases, and which really leverages all the things we see in blockchain. They need to be transported to good business cases, and that's it.
Joachim, I would like to ask you, especially in terms of SMEs, small and mid-sized companies, how can they easily apply all the benefits out of this technology in terms of finance? How do they get access to this? What kind of regulation are already existing? Or what is planned to make it easier, especially for SMEs, to understand how to use and to get the benefit out of that technology?
SMEs, of which we have 25 million in the European Union, as we all know, don't have the resources to spend too much time on learning and experimenting with these things. But if you speak with them and if you use a simple use case, they feel immediately attracted to that. I was speaking 2 days ago, as I think I said, to the cooperative sector, the traditional one. And when I actually went to this hearing, I had the expectation when I told them that what they've been doing for all the time is basically extremely similar to what digital cooperatives are now doing. And they need to, in my opinion, adapt digital tools, for example, for voting, which I find an extremely important use case for blockchain to show every citizen the value, because we see how those in power nowadays treat votes by the people that they don't like, and that is certainly very anti-democratic. So I think that's a very clear use case. The traditional thing on SME communities and cooperatives is one person, one vote. I think that should not be the case. I think there should be co-ownership, but for example, we know many DAOs where if someone has been inactive for 3 months, there's an automatic deduction of the voting power of 10% or whatever. I mean, you can do a lot of fine-tuning to give incentives of that, and I think that's too modernized. But the interesting part that I noted is the extreme interest, actually, that even people in agricultural communities, rural communities have when you actually explain them step by step what you can do with technology. And that is then not about space, but that is about simple payment systems on mobile devices. That is on ensuring when there is a document that you can ensure the integrity of the document and facilitate processes. I mentioned in the discussion to some of the participants here, I think earlier, that we have the situation in France to which I was made aware when a cooperative of 500 people is applying for a loan. The bank asks for 500 copies of passports, and for each loan application. And this is a typical example where actually, in my opinion, much of the resistance that we have from those in power is not because of regulatory concerns. It is not because of procedure, but it is an abuse of regulation to stay in power. And this is where I'm very much aligned with what Sheldon Volin calls the abuse of power by parasitic elites. Because when I listen to the examples from Islamic finance, for example, when I hear how certain people in Europe speak, I do not see any fundamental difference in this. And this is actually globally. People are very, very easily attracted to the inclusivity and to the opportunities created by the technology. And you have the same power structure basically everywhere. And this is take a little example. I mean, I very often work with a extremely silly, in my opinion, example, but it shows the use of digitalization. I have a farmer 5 kilometers from where I live, from where I get my meat. Now that guy sells the cow online, and the cow is only slaughtered when each part of the cow is sold. So if one leg is not sold, the cow is happy to live. And then the moment that's the next day I have my meat. And combine that with ex-ante payments to ensure the payment stream, collection of things, etc. I mean, these are examples that are attractive to millions and millions of people or other things as well. So you have to take people from where they are. And I think that is the good thing about the diversity of these approaches, because that is the big thing for all of this. But don't expect the solution from SMEs to come from regulation. Actually, our regulation is, in my opinion, very bad for that. We have this. I wrote that in the SME strategy 5 years ago, where I said that an action point for us needs to be access to digital finance for small and medium-sized enterprises. So digital loans and equity later and things like that. And now we have the first 2 use cases, actually. One, a good one from 21X. The other is a little Czech project that might come about next year. And they made a hearing in the European Parliament. And they presented what they intend to do next year. And what they want to do next year is something that Tanzania and Uganda did 10 years ago. So why are we so late? And this is only the question of wrong interpretation of aspects of regulation because they're not considered as. So I think when it comes to SMEs, the SMEs are motivated if you speak with them. But especially for SMEs, there is a massive lack of awareness because everyone speaks of unicorns, everyone speaks about this big tech stack that Europe has to build, etc. Let's burn hundreds of billions and we have our infrastructure, etc. It doesn't come from that. The way that, and that's my last remark, the US had their industrial revolution was not by watching John Wayne movies where the railway is going through the Wild West and then comes progress. But actually, if you look at the facts, what got the iron and steel industry going is nails, is cooking pans. Because every household has little items with iron, and if you count the millions of them, you have big business. That is the future. The future is thinking small, but getting through the sheer amount into big business.
Thank you so much for this. Well, that, I think, is a very nice outlook, what we should take into consideration. And due to the time, I really would like to open the discussion for the audience. You see, we have a lot of experts here, and probably you would like to join the discussion and ask our expert some questions. So, are there questions? Yes, I see Timur is the first who is raising the hand. That's nice.
You just mentioned that we basically have in Europe bureaucracy that finances itself and that blockchain is like a big competition to that. So do you think it's realistic to get the EU Parliament to vote on something which could kind of get them out of work? Because a lot of bureaucracy could be automated by blockchain, should be. But as long as those people are in power, I kind of am afraid to see a path where they will vote on something that will make the EU more efficient, but also replace their work, kind of? What do you think? How could be the roadmap to actually get the bureaucracy in Europe with the blockchain technology too?
To melt it down, not to
exactly, to boil it down.
That question is for Marina because she knows much more about that than I do. But before she collects her thought, how old are you? That is much younger than the average age of members of the European Parliament. Now, I now see my 6 European Parliaments throughout my career. During the last Parliament, we had 5 out of 700-something European parliamentarians that could write the word blockchain without misspelling. Now we are at 30. That is a demographic effect. And that is where my optimism comes from, because I spend a lot of time at developers events, hacks, talking to the young generation, learning from my son, doing a lot of different things. If you grow up organically in a world where you expect things to be connected online, where you know what a token is, when you have a part of your digital identity online that does certain activities, you want to have a value layer, perhaps using NFTs to document that and stuff like that, you will, in the foreseeable future, when you creep through the institutions, not accept the world where they block all of your innovation. This is what we're currently observing. And this is what we've seen throughout history, actually, when, for example, 30 years ago, I was working on the transition from centrally planned economies to market economies. And I'm personally not so much convinced by market economies, I must say, but at the time I was young and stupid. And we thought that we could educate these people to understand how beautiful market economies are in a way, especially in the Anglo-American sense, and no one believed that. And why? Because these people have value systems, and then changes come when old people die and young people come. And I think I said that when I spoke here last, and you didn't like it, Katarina. We are not old. We are at most medium something. But that's the future. That is, I do not find a way. I spent endless time trying to speak to those of them that I see as more innovative. And after 4 hours, I have them slowly understanding the difference between a CBDC and a stablecoin. And then they go back and they forgot everything. No. Unfortunately, it will not work. They have to get out and new ones will have to come in.
That's it.
Just to add to that, also at the beginning, the first time when I think the European Parliament had an agreement on a paper, I think it was 2017-16, they first went to everyone that was younger than 40, and they convinced them and talked to them, and then they convinced their own colleagues there. But in a way, the European Union and how the governance works is so much more complicated than the Parliament. We have the Commission that, as you see, it's very knowledgeable about so many different things. And then the Parliament, which I think also in a way needs to be addressed and needs to be talked to, and just hearing their concerns as well, because they're in a way really representing the European Union citizens. And then the member states, which it depends on their financial ministry, innovation ministry, depends on what's happening and who is voting and where and who in a way is winning those specific elections. So the thing that in a way works in Europe, I would say, as opposed to the US, because many times in crypto we do compare those two jurisdictions, is that Europe is early, but it takes some time to finalize, let's say, a regulation or a directive. So we worked on MiCA for the 6 years, 7 years, and now we have it here, but it was still earlier than what happened in the US. So in a way, I think this predictability, the sense of like understanding what is going to happen, where we hear the Commission at the beginning of their mandate sharing what their plans are, in which direction they're going to go. I think it's good for the industry, for everyone working within this space, because they can also prepare. I mean, we will talk, and we mentioned tokenization. Now there's this important Savings and Investments Union program where tokenization is mentioned, and we do know that that is going to be one of the priorities of the EU, and we can already think about maybe business models and collaborations on this front.
Anything you'd like to add? Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned bureaucracy. And I had just recently had 2 experiences with regulation. I did an ISO 27001 certification, and I wrote a white paper according to MiCA. And when you do that, you see that actually none of the things that are addressed there do not have any legitimation. And all the bureaucracy actually is the helpless reaction of to make sure that everything is addressed, and you have to document it. And one thing that blockchain might solve there is that open source software might be accepted as a process that does not need to be documented anymore. And this is something where blockchain technology and smart contracts might really help to reduce bureaucracy, because actually this is only the helpless reaction of those that are in power and that are in charge to make sure that everything is addressed. Yeah.
500 copies of passports too.
Yeah. No, well, this is abusive. This is a different example. But really, all the topics in these ISO certifications did have the reason. Yeah, and you have to make sure that you address them. Another problem is that you cannot really outsource that. You cannot say, hey, this part of this security things I outsource to something, because you have to be able to control them. This is something where we should maybe on the political base discuss if we can build trust chains where small and medium or industry at any level can really completely outsource certain things without being forced to be able to control them. And because this is something, we are now 12 persons company. Yeah, this took so many resources. We did it because we needed it, but actually it was from the business. It was a catastrophe. Yeah, so but still we need to work on how we can make sure that the technology is replacing the need of documentation. This might be one among other things that we might address. Okay.
Are there any further questions? Yes, Adri.
Well, thank you. I have a question to all of you in the panel. What, in your opinion, is inhibiting the breakthrough of blockchain, right? What is putting on the brakes, the handbrake, so prohibiting the breakthrough? If you had to name one factor, maybe you will say education, or maybe you say regulation, or whatever. What is the factor, what is the key that is missing for blockchain to go the same speed and the same road as artificial intelligence?
In a way, I would say education, specifically on a technical level, because for other things, I think we can just use them without knowing how they work, especially when it comes to business relationships. But just a very, very vivid example right now. I think the challenge that blockchain brings, it's also a gift in a way. We have, for the first time in history, something that works without an intermediary, without someone centrally, in a way, controlling it. And it really poses a lot of problems when it comes to regulation, regulators and lawyers, because we're always used to have one entity, this entity is responsible, and this entity will take like all the responsibility and will assure that things should work as they work. And an example, again, is the recent guidance issued by the European Data Protection Board on how to use GDPR for blockchain, how to basically make blockchain compliant. And it was, in a way, I really invite you to read it if you don't have anything to do in the evenings after work or studying. But it's really interesting because it's, in a way, so detached from how blockchains work, especially permissionless blockchains, that, in a way, it's almost impossible for it to be compliant. And this is where the challenge is. We need to think twice, 10 times more to really think about data protection and GDPR. This is just one example, but there are many more.
Arno, it's nice to see you here, and it's nice to hear you ask questions where you know perfectly well that you know the answer much better than we do. My reply to you is that we are much too nice to people that abuse us. And that relates to, for example, big tech companies that steal our data to feed their AI models, or regulators that do not take into account the rules that we actually have on data protection and privacy, but give bad regard to technologies that actually preserve privacy because of a fetishism of anti-money laundering rules, for example, and certain excessive things in a way. But also because indeed we do not really look ahead as individuals, and that's in a way our own fault, but we are stuck in a narrative that intermediaries the last 500 years have imposed on us. I mean, when I look at social relations, I do not primarily think of money. And I know, and I come from a farmer's family, and my other part of the family is railway workers that had basically no money, but they got a garden from the railway company and a house. So we exchanged goods. And I know that barter trade is seen as very inefficient by economists, but actually tokenized barter trade, if we look at what value can do in a digital domain, we actually have much more flexibility of deciding on what value is. I give you an information, you give me something else, we can actually find a registry to tokenize that, so to have a sort of meaningful exchange in a way that we all feel fairly treated subjectively. This is an enormously powerful thing, but instead we tend to discuss, and I find it important on CBDCs and on all sorts of existing things, but this is to do the job of the banks, of TradFi and the established intermediaries. And while this is important for many companies and many citizens, I agree, there is an increasing number of people in the world that are challenged by natural disasters, that are challenged by an increasing poverty, by an increasing abuse of power of those that actually do have the money and don't care anymore about democratic processes. And this calls for revolution. This calls for basically all of just getting our act together and not proactively doing the job of those that abuse us. And this is basically the question why I think everyone should step by step familiarize them with technology, look for people on whom they can talk, basically start with little examples of exchanging value and see actually how strong this concept is.
Thank you. And last but not least, Markus, please.
Well, I do not think that it's education because it is the adoption that we need. And when e-commerce got successful, it was not because people knew how TCP/IP was working. They had a use case that convinced them to invest in the infrastructure, to buy a modem or something, to be part of that. And what we need is a working business model or business case or use case that incentivizes the people to adopt the technology. And then the technology can be successful, not by telling them how the technology is working. Okay.
I wanted to stop because I know, Joachim, you need to sneak out.
I've talked much too much, so
We allow Joachim to sneak out because he has another call, but the panel will stay. Thank you so much. And I see two more hands were raised. I start with you, Nina.
Thank you. Don't you think that maybe one of the issues is also the lack of convenience? Very simply, right? Because I think every one of us who deals with this, we all lost coins in the beginning, right? So, and I think that is something that is threatening. So do you have any idea how to overcome that hurdle?
Hot storage, cold storage.
Well, that's actually part of the working business case that is incentivizing you to use the technology, is that it's convenient. Otherwise, you will not use it. You're absolutely right. I agree. We need convenience. We need processes that are learned, that are not too far away from what is learned. Maybe we need to be really transparent, or we need to hide the blockchain behind it. We just need to get the people use it and get used to it.
Yeah, so I think that just going into maybe a little bit of what Joachim just mentioned, there are different reasons maybe in different parts of the world. Here, where I would say, more or less the government works, it works, we are looking into convenience. But if someone would want to, use any type of also privacy-preserving tech or remittance in some other countries, then maybe even if it's not convenient, but it's really one of the only technologies that they can use in order to achieve what they want to achieve, maybe then convenience would be the secondary thing. I was just talking to one of the also privacy-preserving technologies, and they just said that their tech is used by the UN in order to basically help distribute help for some programs in Africa that are linked to different in a way areas there, because they need to make it in a privacy preserving way because of the potential attacks of terrorists, etc. So it's really, I think, maybe a different answer in different parts of the world.
Okay, thank you so much. I was just listening to him on the question he asked about one thing that has stopped blockchain from exploding, just like AI. And right here, I was making a little bit of comparison between AI, because AI seems to be everywhere, and blockchain. But blockchain has been there and no one is really into it. But something came to my mind. I'm like, the big tech companies are in the forefront of the AI, the government is on the front. But on the contrary, the big guys, the gatekeepers, the banks, the governments, and the big companies are scared because blockchains tend to empower the individuals. So could it be one of the reasons why blockchain is not making any headway and may not make any headway because of the gatekeepers? I mean, the institutional regulations are because of control of money, control of the system. So could this be one of the reasons why blockchain is not going to make any headway, just like AI?
Thank you.
I think it definitely could, because blockchain, as I mentioned, one of the mass adoption part is really the finance. And when it comes to finance, it's much highly regulated than, let's say, AI, at least globally. We have data regulation in Europe and AI regulation, but not globally. So it's definitely easier to use some tech that is not directly related to finance or creates assets itself. And then for the other use cases of blockchain, maybe some other co-panelists know more, but let's say supply chain, etc. I think, I don't know, it was just like also rethinking the whole structure and the whole tech structure that you have in your company, and asking yourself, is it really worth it with the cost that I have to put in order to change the let's say, the software that I have today? So many answers to this question.
Anything you'd like to add?
Too much, I guess.
Too much. Okay, so I think this is probably the good way to say for this panel, thank you so much to my panelists. Thank you so much that you were here with me. And we'll have another panel